Any delays here at this point, especially if there's a breach or a compromise in systems, can be costly and can put the reputation of the organization at risk. So don't delay, don't despair. Act upon this quickly and do whatever you can do to mitigate this risk to protect your organization and your customers that are dependent upon you. Hey, what's up? This is Jamal Abbott. Thanks for tuning in. Here to talk to you today about cybersecurity incident response and business continuity planning. This is the fourth and last part of our Cybersecurity Awareness series for the month of October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And we're going to give you some ideas to think about when it comes to actually responding to these types of incidents. We talked earlier in the series about it's not a matter of if you'll be hit with a cyber attack, but when. And this episode's all about the how to respond, how to react when you're confronted with a cybersecurity incident. So stay tuned and you're going to get a lot of good information and tips and some ideas to consider. As we're thinking about cybersecurity incidents and how to respond to them, let's take a step back first and really define what is a cybersecurity incident. A cybersecurity incident is when something happens to an organization's data or systems that puts them at risk. Now, this could be intentional, like a hacker breaking into an organization and stealing data, or unintentional, like information that's sensitive or proprietary to an organization that is exposed and falls into the wrong hands. With either one of these things, these are incidents that an organization has to respond to, and they have to do so in the right amount of time. Some examples of cybersecurity incidents, and in no particular order here from this list, include data breaches, malware attacks, DDoS attacks, with DDoS standing for distributed denial of service, phishing attacks, insider threats, vulnerability exploitation, web application attacks, supply chain attacks, and finally social engineering attacks. Some of these terms you may have heard before and maybe some that you haven't, but what I would encourage you to do is to look up this information so that way you can get yourself familiar with this, and also that gives you an idea of what to look out for when you're considering how to protect your data and then your company's proprietary information. Just a couple examples to give you here, one of them being social engineering. So this can be somebody that's looking to get some information out of you, and that can come from an email with somebody trying to be friendly, or somebody trying to get proprietary or sensitive information that you would know, but other outsiders wouldn't know. And with these social engineering attacks, this is information that can be used to penetrate some of the initial defenses for your organization and can lead to some bigger problems if this attacker is successful in getting access to the environment. Another one that is pretty common that you may have heard quite a bit are the data breaches, and this can be in the form of personal information like address, social security numbers, bank account information, things of that nature. And those are some things that you would commonly hear from like a retail establishment being attacked, or even what we talked about in the previous episode with the Las Vegas hotel operators being hit with a cyber attack. Now that we know what cybersecurity incidents are, let's take a closer look at incident response and how we can respond to these events. Let's define incident response, which are the steps and the actions taken to recover from a cybersecurity incident. It's important to understand that there's tons of different frameworks, different plans, and different processes that are out there which talk about how organizations can respond to cybersecurity incidents. And as I was looking over this information, I would just encourage you at this point to look at the different frameworks that are out there, which I will link into this episode. Look at the different frameworks that are out there and then adopt the ones that are going to be most relevant to your organization. One of the worst things that you can do for your business is to try to bring something into the organization that isn't going to be acted upon. So once again, I just encourage you to look over these different frameworks, adopt the ones that seem to make sense, and then also with that, take the time to build on that over time. You don't have to have a complete and comprehensive cybersecurity plan initially if you're not there yet, but this is an opportunity for you to start with the foundation and then build upon that over time. And this is a great time to seek help and to get that support that you need to ensure that your plans are most appropriate for your business and is something that you're actually going to follow through with. So you've selected your plan. Now it's time to ensure that it's acted upon. And this is where coordination with your team comes into play. One thing to keep in mind is that the coordination of your plan will vary depending upon the size of your organization. So you could be that smaller business with maybe 5 or 10 employees, or that larger organization that has a number of different departments and a number of different members within that. It's important to ensure that each of those team members knows what's going on with that plan and how they play a role in ensuring that plan gets carried out effectively. Another thing to think about too when it comes to this coordinated response to cybersecurity incidents is the importance of time. Time is the one factor that has to be treated with the utmost importance, because this is going to determine how fast you're able to mitigate these things once they pop up, as well as notifying the customers and the stakeholders that are impacted by this particular breach. So let's just say, for instance, there is a data breach. How fast will your team jump into action to carrying out your incident response plan? And then how fast will they notify customers, the public, if you're a publicly traded organization, or other stakeholders about what's going on with the data that they've entrusted you with? Any delays here at this point, especially if there's a breach or a compromise in systems, can be costly and can put the reputation of the organization at risk. So don't delay, don't despair. Act upon this quickly and do whatever you can do to mitigate this risk to protect your organization and your customers that are dependent upon you. And here, once again, your team is going to play a vital factor in ensuring that everything goes smoothly. When your teams are collaborating and doing this effectively, this not only makes this incident much more smoother to handle, but also ensures that there's less confusion and less drama surrounding this. This is already going to be a stressful situation as it is when something gets compromised, whether it's your data or your systems, but having your team members not in sync with what's going on can make for a much more stressful situation and a much more longer one to deal with. All right, at this point, we talked about what is a cybersecurity incident. We talked about incident response and how a timely response to this is important. Now we're going to look at business continuity and some best practices surrounding that. Business continuity is near and dear to my heart. During my time in the Air Force, where I managed different communication systems, this was something that we practiced time and time again to ensure that our systems were up to date, they were online, and if something went wrong, what we were going to do to ensure that outage was minimized without our customers knowing. In those instances where an outage was prolonged, we had to make sure that different plans and different mechanisms were in place to minimize the effects of that outage. And this is where business continuity planning is important for your organization. So you could be a healthcare company where you have lives at stake. You could be a financial services company to where time is money and any time lost can impact the bottom line for an organization. Or you could be any other entity out there that has customers dependent upon you to get their jobs done. So it's important for you to have that plan in place just in case if something goes wrong or if something unexpected happens. How are you going to respond to that issue? And then how are you going to respond to ensure that you're back up and running as quickly as possible? And in the context of cybersecurity, business continuity is a plan that keeps the essential functions operating for your business during and after a cybersecurity episode. So with this, we're making sure that the business stays operational, as well as being able to take care of customers during this tough time. Now, within that business continuity plan, you're going to have some specific actions that you have your critical systems tied to. Within that disaster recovery plan, you're going to have some strategies to back up your data, as well as use the cloud to store that data in a place away from your business, as well as have some other safeguards to protect that data. So all of these things are helpful to ensure that your business is able to operate and to function during this difficult time, but also gives you an opportunity to recover just in case if something happens with data being taken ransom or data getting wiped out altogether. So instead of you having to rebuild from scratch, you're able to pull a backup copy because you have been practicing these steps outlined in that disaster recovery situation. So this is meant to save you some time, effort, and energy in the process, as well as get you back up and running as quickly as possible. And mind you, with all these things, it's going to take some time and some effort to get to this point to where it's just a matter of, pushing a couple buttons and then making sure that your plans are functioning. But the work that you put in ahead of time is going to save you so much more time down the road if you're ever involved in this type of situation. And then the last thing that we need to talk about here before we wrap this episode up is the importance of testing and making sure that your plan works and it actually makes sense. And this is where you get the feedback from your team, from the employees, and just making sure that you go through these things, you go through the process of working this disaster recovery plan and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and seeing what things need to be tweaked and fixed along the way. For you to go through all this work and not to test this out is definitely a mistake, but you're definitely going to be ahead of the game if you look to practice these things, get the feedback that you need, and making sure that this will all work out when it's supposed to. We cover a lot of information in this particular podcast. So just to recap, we first talked about what is a cybersecurity incident. We also looked at cybersecurity incident response and how to work through those things, as well as looking at some disaster recovery steps and procedures. Now, if you have any questions about anything discussed in this episode, feel free to hit me up. You can reach me at social media at Jamal Abbott, or you can hit me up on my website, jamalabbott.com/contact, and you can reach me there. Definitely hit me up. Would love to hear your feedback on this episode, as well as any of the other episodes that we have covered with cybersecurity awareness. So check those other ones out. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.